left the one. It's a good place. Yeah, it's really well done.
Back in the day, when we were going the town option was to drive or wet. Oh, drive or you stay wet. So this was inviting.
Well, that's where it was. There are a lot of shops.
Yeah.
Well, we had a bar. And I do.
No, thank you.
You guys want a fan?
The middle of the library, is it line? Yeah. I don't know how
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the Parma United Church of Christ, where no matter who you are or where you are in life's journey, you are welcome here. I'm Pastor Jessie Lou Vaccarelli, and it's been my honor to serve this church for the last 2 years. And I'm very happy that you've chosen to spend some time on this steamy evening with us. I got my crib notes here. This church this week is celebrating its 192nd anniversary. And I'm going to assume that sometime during its inception, there were people still sitting around the fireplace or around the dining room table telling stories about the Revolutionary War. And as it turns out, we do have a very personal connection to those folks who did serve in the Revolution on behalf of the Patriots. Tonight, in honor of America's 250th, we're going to hear those stories and tales of the local settlers, courtesy of our guest. But before we begin, I just want to do some housekeeping details. Please notice the 2 exits in this room in case of an emergency. Also, if you have a cell phone, please take a moment now to make sure it's either turned off or on silent. Don't assume you already did that, because that's what I do and I always forget. The restrooms are down the hall, and if you follow all the way down to the end of the hall, you will find our reception for this evening. Lots of cold beverages and cookies. And we'll have some time then to chat with our guests and with each other and get to know each other better. Just a reminder, this is a free evening. It is our gift to the community. But if you are so moved and would like to make a donation, we certainly will not say no. So there will be an offering plate outside the sanctuary and also one down in the fellowship hall. So without further delay, I would like to introduce David Crumb, the Parma Town Historian. Or did I get that backwards? Hilton Parma Town Historian. So can we give him a warm welcome, please?
I want to make sure that you can hear me. Am I too loud or is it just right?
Oh, you're just right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Pastor Jesse Lou. It's always a pleasure to come here. This is one of our last country churches, and you are putting great spirit back into the church, and it's wonderful to see that, and I'm delighted to be able to have a chance to say a few words. This is America 250, as we all know, and it's been a busy year for everybody. Every town and village across the country is doing something, and Parma has had its hands full doing things, and it's been really a pleasure. One of the objectives I thought this year was to try to learn all I could about the Revolutionary War. We've been hearing about it since we were kids, but to really understand what was going on is hard. It's 250 years ago, and times were much different back then. Today we're in a fast-paced world with technology, social network, bringing lots of information to the front, but the big question was, what was it like back then? I've watched Ken Burns' documentary 2 or 3 times, trying to really get into things, and it's helped. Our Parma Town Historical Society formed a book club, and this year we only read books that were about the Revolution. And one of the books, the first one we read was 1776 by David McCullough. How many of you have read that one? Okay. That gives you a first-hand account of what that particular year was like and the hardships that George Washington went through. It was a great read. The second book we read was by a woman, by Cokie Roberts, called Founding Mothers. Anybody happen to read that one? Okay, that was really interesting. She gave the woman's perspective. There were, Martha Washington was a great player in the Revolution. John Adams' wife, Abigail. Elizabeth Warren. Of course, Mary Hayes, better known as Molly Pitcher. She got right out there after her husband was shot down, and she manned the cannon right afterwards. And there were many, many more stories that were up in that book. The next book we read was Jeff Shahara's Glorious Cause. That's a big, thick book, but it has little chapters, so you could read a chapter every night. And he took you through the entire war, right from the beginning to the end at Yorktown. And that left me with some really good understanding. And perhaps one of the most enjoyable ones was one by Joseph Plum Martin. He was a private in the war, all 7 years. And he went in when he was about 18, I guess. And he seemed to enjoy it. And when he was, I would say probably around 60 or 70, he wrote he took his diary and he kind of polished it up, but he left us with a first-hand account of a private in the Revolution. I think it's the only one that's been clarified by historians and is pretty accurate. But if you think reading about Washington and Valley Forge and the bloody footprints was bad, you should read this one. These boys went sometimes 48 hours with nothing to eat, and when they did have something to eat, it was like cornmeal mush or hardtack or even shoe leather, I guess. It was unbelievable what they went through and yet survived. A lot of them didn't survive, of course. So, moving along, I wanted to also have a few pictures of the church in my PowerPoint, and also tell you just a couple other things that we did so far during the year. There's been so much going on. One of the big events was our Summer Smash, which is Parma's kind of big summer picnic with drones, fireworks, bands, food trucks, the whole works. That was, we had about 5,000 people come. Personally, what I did for the America 250 was I joined the SAR, Sons of the American Revolution. Anybody in here a member of that group? Well, I'd known about it, but I never really knew anybody really into it. And several of our Historical Society members joined this year, much younger than I was, and I thought, gee, if they get in, I'm going to go in. I knew I had Patriot ancestors, and my grandmother did the DAR, and I had all of her papers. So I got the application up online. You have to prove who your parents were, who their parents were, and you have to go down the line until you get a revolution, somebody that is, what's the word, legally accepted as a revolutionary patriot. And they're all on record through the pension records and things of that nature. And I found a gentleman in Waitsfield, Vermont, by the name of Silas Smith. And I happened to have his Bible. And he wrote all the names of his children in Spencerian calligraphy in this Bible. He wrote about his father, Moses Smith, who was on the Committee of Correspondence of Hadley, Mass. So he was another Patriot ancestor. Whole families were involved. So you find one, and you look a little further, you've probably got another one or two out there. But anyway, I'm past 80, and I figured, well, better late than never. So, and I've really enjoyed going to the meetings, and I invited them to come to Summer Smash. The sad news was I was in Michigan during Summer Smash. I had a commitment out there. But they showed up, and they were big hit people. They added an original touch to the event. And young families came up and talked to them and learned about what they do. And they're a very philanthropic group. They do nice things for organizations, and so they do good work. We also put together a time capsule. We have a large stone that we found. We're going to engrave that with just 250 on it, so that as the years go by, they'll see 250, and hopefully they'll recall this year and all the memories that were created. We're planting a special tree by the stone, which in 50 years will hopefully grow to a good size, and people will remember this particular year and everything that went into it. And of course, the time capsule, where all the organizations around the community can leave a letter or a program. This would be the churches, the schools, the Masonic group, the American Legion, the Historical Society, and on it goes. That's been advertised, and we've gotten quite a few things, but they don't have to be in by tomorrow. Fortunately, it's available to the end of the year, and then we're going to lock the box, put it away, and bury the key. So that was an event that took place last week. A wonderful book by Amanda Dudley. She researched all of the Patriots, and that is our connection in Parma. We had no battles here, but we had 16 Patriots. These are veterans of the Revolutionary War who made their way to Parma to either settle here or spend their later years with their children. And in all of our different cemeteries, we have 2 or 3, and this book shows all the cemeteries, shows the roadmap, how to get to them, and then a complete bio on each of these gentlemen. And that'll be available in the reception room afterwards for a donation of $5 each. And it probably is one of the best artifacts as a keepsake to have for this particular year, because it's been carefully researched, and it's a great thing to put in the time capsule as well. We put flags on all the Patriots' graves. We had a coloring contest in the works presently. by Margaret Wheelahan, who's our newsletter publisher. There's a trivia contest, and of course, as I mentioned, the viewing of all of Ken Berg's documents. Now I want to go into a little bit of the history of the church. Here you see how it looks today, and this picture is excellent because it's cropped out all of those telephone wires that get in the way of the steeple and the signs. And this is an earlier painting of the church that was done a number of years ago. I don't really know the history exactly behind that, but it was available in our files, and it kind of takes you back in time when the front entrance was right under the bell tower. And the front entrance is still there, only we use the side now because of the traffic and parking. And now, in 1904, this cobblestone structure sat right on these foundations. And it was torn down, unfortunately, but they needed a larger and a more up-to-date church. And so that is what happened, but it's on the foundation, and the original cornerstone is still easily seen. This church was built in 1845. And Isaac Chase was a name we hear a lot about, was one of the founders of the church. And at the same time, a cobblestone addition was built on his house. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we move along. I don't know who the two gentlemen are sitting there. Anybody who's seen this picture have an idea? Jesse, any thoughts? No? I don't know who they are. Probably Mr. Chase, and it looked like he's reading the newspaper. And this is a picture here that includes that cobblestone church and how it looked with the fence. And then, most interestingly, is this little red barn here, which is on Burt Road, on 98 Burt Road, the home of Craig and Sue Corey's. It once stood on the corner of Manitou Road and Burt Road, and it was one of the early schoolhouses. And in 1830, the people who founded the church met there for their first services. And they met there until about 1844, I think, maybe 45, about 15 years, the services for the church. It was a congregational group. I know the Chase family were Quakers, but they met there and they set the rules, and we have, in the church archives here, is the original church records that were taken at that time. They have one page or copy that I'll show you shortly. But that little building has been preserved. The Coreys have taken good care of it. They know of its historical importance. It was written up in a 1933 or 36 Hilton Record article when the church, I think, celebrated maybe its 100th year or 105th year. And it talked about it being on the George Anderson farm in those days. So we know for sure that that is the building. How did it get over there at 98 Road? Well, apparently, a gentleman by the name of Dennis Paper once lived in a house there at 98, and he kept a diary from 1858 until he died in 1908. And they're very thorough. Every day he wrote something in the diary, like it snowed and blowed, or we killed some hogs, the typical things you'd find in a farmer's diary. And every now and then something like somebody's funeral or somebody's marriage. But those diaries are being transcribed today, and they leave a wonderful record of what happened in Parma from 1858 to 1908. We had no newspaper here until 1897. That was the Hilton Record. So the former historian who received these diaries, Leah Wright, she got a letter from a lady in Hawaii who wrote to her and said, I have Mr. Tabor's diaries. He was my great-grandfather. Would the Historical Society be interested? Well, she fired a special delivery letter right back and said, yes, we would. And then they were shipped over. and they turned out to be a great resource. But in those diaries, Mr. Tabor writes somewhere around 1870, we moved the schoolhouse from Darwin's farm, that would have been Darwin Chase, over to my farm. And so we have that record to show when the school was moved. And how did they do it? Probably with a team of oxen or two, jacked it up, and down the road it went. They didn't have telephone wires to worry about. And in those days, they moved houses and barns very easily. And there's a larger photograph of it, so how it's been restored. Probably the lower section of the building had been rotted out, the beams had rotted out, so early, probably when they moved it, they put it up in this limestone, or what kind of stone is that?
Hillside.
Yes, that kind of stone. Here's an early picture of the Isaac Chase house. Now this front part of the building here was built, I think, in concert with the church. The reason for that is the stone, or the cobblestone masons in those days could only do 6 or 8 courses of the stones up, and they had to let them dry. But they could do that in the morning, and so they'd go over to the other building in the afternoon and lay out the 6 or 8 courses. And so always 2 buildings seem to be built at the same time. And so this lower part, which you'll see in the next picture, you can see it a little better here, was the first part of the building, or the Chase home built, probably by Isaac Chase Sr. We'll talk about him in just a moment. It's a low 2-story, but the upstairs, I've been upstairs, and the ceiling slope, you can't always stand up straight and it was the original fireplaces in existence there, and that is the section of the house where the Underground Railroad took place. Slaves, Mr. Chase was an abolitionist, and he took care of these, it was a safe house. Slaves could stop, and when I was in the house when Harold and Harriet Blank were there, they took me into this room and showed me a trap door that would open up into a false basement underneath that particular floor. And that's always been part of the history of the town of Parma, and that's kind of connected here to the church as well. And I'm sure the Chases had great stories to tell. Unfortunately, they didn't get written down, so I don't know too many of them, but we do know a few things. Okay, Isaac Chase Sr. was born in 1763, and he died in 1848, at about 85, I believe. He was born into a Quaker family on October 9th in Swansea, Mass., which is on the coast of the Atlantic. And he grew up later to become a captain, a sea captain. But in the Revolutionary War days, it is reported that he served as a member of Colonel James Holmes' 4th New York Regiment in 1775. And it was thought he was a galley boy in an American Navy ship. So that's our connection for this church to the Revolutionary War. And there's a lot to this connection when you've got the original house next door, the Underground Railroad, Isaac Chase Jr. being a supervisor of the town of Parma on 6 occasions back in the 1840s up through the 1870s. And they were great contributors to the building of this community. Now, there's no picture. I'm going to go back. One of the things coming up in this program is a visitor from Oregon that came in last year named Betsy Chase. And Betsy Chase, very interested in her genealogy and the Chase family history. And she called me a week ahead of time, said I'd be in town. We set up a meeting, and she told us a lot of interesting things that we didn't know. She descends from James Chase, who was the brother of Isaac Chase. And he lived on a Burr Road, And his son was this Darwin that I mentioned earlier, who owned the schoolhouse. James Chase Sr. was Isaac Chase Jr.'s brother, son of Isaac Chase the first, or the senior. So, since we had no picture, I found a daguerreotype. Isaac Chase Sr. Lived between 1839 and 1848, and that was the first age of photography. That's when daguerreotypes were first invented by Louis Daguerre in Paris, 1839. It's a silver emulsion on copper, and I happen to have one. This guy here looks like he's probably in his 80s, and all these people that I'm going to show you as they come up are looking very serious. Everybody says, oh, gee, they don't look very happy. Well, first of all, they had a clamp in the back of their head that probably pinched. They had to hold that pose for about a minute and a half till the emulsion set, and everything had to be just right. Plus, you have the photographer said, sit there, move your head this way, and so they don't look real happy. The other thing is, too, that they didn't want to grin and a smile, because sometimes they were missing teeth. And they didn't want to look goofy for their ancestors, their descendants. So when we see these old photographs, we're thinking, boy, they look like really tough old croons. They're probably very nice people, probably very strict with their religion and with their principles. But so this is not Isaac Chase Sr., but it's what he might have looked like, or in the type of photography, if a picture had existed. And I'm convinced there must have been a picture of him, but with all his children and descendants, somebody else got it, and it went down another path. Okay, here we go. This gentleman here has nothing to do with Parma, but I learned about him last week. His name is Nicholas Veeder. He's from Schenectady, New York. He is the last Revolutionary War veteran in Schenectady. And he created a little museum at his home, which was called the Fort, in Scotia, New York, which is near Schenectady. And he lived to be 101. And when you think about that, being born in 1762 and dying in 1863, that's quite a stretch, with no modern medicine, no penicillin, no ibuprofen, nothing other than whiskey, or whatever they used in herbs to keep well. So this gentleman here was photographed. I met a gentleman when I was down in Madison, New York, who had bought this gentleman's diary and his musket and the photograph in a collection. And it was such an interesting and valuable collection. He went to the Pawn Stars in Las Vegas. Anybody watch the Pawn Stars? Well, I saw a clip that he showed me. I'd never heard of Nicholas Veeder before, but I thought it was too good to miss. And so now I'm going to do something that I never do with a promotion or a presentation, but I'm going to sing. So hold your breath. I don't have a good voice, but this little ditty is just too good not to let go. And it's called I'm Just an Old Revolutionary Soldier. So here we go. I'm just an old revolutionary soldier, but I've handled a gun where noble deeds were done, and the name of my commander was George Washington. I fought my home and my country to me were dear, and I fought for both when the foe came near. But now and then, with a slight or sneer, for I'm nothing but a plain old soldier, nothing but a plain old soldier, an old revolutionary soldier, but it handled a gun where noble deeds were done, and the name of my commander was George Washington. So this old gentleman here probably, thank you. I'm not a singer, but the ditty was just too good to let go. So there you know about Nicholas Veeder. And here's the next picture of him sitting in front of his fort. I mean, look at all those muskets out there. that he had. And this gentleman, Arnott, has one of them, plus his diary. And he bought them, believe it or not, from one of his descendants. I can't imagine him letting it go. But this gentleman was in the same time period as Isaac Chase Sr., born around 1762. He died in 1863. Isaac Chase Sr., 1863 to 1848. So they were kind of parallel. But this guy was a survivor. And these survivors were not happy about the Civil War. They said, gee, we fought to save our country, and now they're dividing it. What's going on? So that was the sentiment. There are not too many Revolutionary War survivors, but there are a few. This is Betsy Chase. Very nice lady from a little town in Oregon. Her father was Wilbur Chase, who grew up in Batavia. Her grandfather was from Batavia. Her great-grandfather was James Darwin, who we just mentioned. Her great-great-grandfather was James Chase, brother of Isaac Jr. She was thrilled to be able to stand in front of the Chase homestead, now owned by Harold Wyatt's daughter, Becky. And Becky was gracious enough to let us walk around the house. We didn't call in advance, so it was one of those things. We knocked on the door. She said, I'm busy inside, but feel free to walk around. Not everything to this lady. She told me, I've got an album at home that I found in my father's garage when we went out to sell the estate out in Phoenix, Arizona. And apparently it's been in that garage for 50 years. You know how hot it gets out in Arizona. I thought, oh boy, I hope there's something left of it. She was nice enough to have her husband photograph all the photos in this album. And these are never before seen photos of the Chase family by anybody but you folks tonight. I've seen them and Frank's seen them, but they really add a tremendous amount to this Chase family connection or album that we have in the file we have in the historian's office. So, next slide, there's the album. The pictures have been taken out and photographed. And so, now this is the barn on the Isaac Chase farm, and it's still there. This is how it looks today. Cupola is still there. The picture you saw earlier, where is it? Right up here. You see the barn up in the corner there. Everything is still intact. Even that pear orchard out in front, there's still 2 pear trees left. This picture was done in 1877. Now we're in 2026. They say, he who plants pears plants for his heirs. Mm-hmm. So be it, because they're still there. I think if they really taken care of them, they probably all would have been there. But there's a lot more flora and fauna around the house today. But those buildings are still intact. That shows you Isaac Chase in that picture. Again, he and his wife, he had 3 wives. They passed on and married another. I don't know much of their history. But this picture was in the 1877 History of Monroe County book, which was written by Erastus Turner, I believe, in 1877, in celebration of 1876, which was the centennial of the Revolution.
It's very much like the picture you had.
Pardon me?
It looks very much like the picture you had earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Now there's the Chase, Isaac Chase in the from Betsy Chase's album. I've never seen this picture of him before. These are carte de visites, all taken in the 1860s. We started out with a daguerreotype, 1839 to about 1850. New technology came in and they came up with the ambrotype, which was an emulsion on glass. It was much cheaper for everybody and came up with great pictures. And then after that, they got into aluminum and then tintypes. Now these are the aluminum carte de visites, that means small card photo. And this is Isaac Chase. They're all labeled as they were in the album. And you see there's a junior there. He's the oldest brother of the Chase family. Now we're going to go through Isaac Chase Sr.'s children, at least the ones that were available in the album. That's Isaac Chase's wife, Hannah Edgerton. This is Isaac Chase's son in his Civil War uniform, Edwin Chase. I don't know much about him. We'll be researching more as time goes along. That's a great picture of him. I think he's got a sword. He's holding his hat. He's a sergeant. This is James Chase and his wife, Betsy Tripp. James Chase was born about 1808, and he died in 1905. He was about 95. And he lived on the Burritt Road, on the corner of Burritt Road. I think he probably owned the farm where that school originally was. Then his son was James Darwin Chase. The mother, there's a little story that goes along with that. Betsy didn't really want to name her son James because she didn't like nicknames. She knew they'd call him Jim. And so the fathers wanted him named after him. So she said, only if we can call him James Darwin, and we'll call him Darwin, which they did. But according to the story, he ended up being called Jim all the time. So now there's James Chase at 95. We just saw him a minute ago in the 1860s, probably 60-ish, and some 30, maybe 40 years later at 95. And I believe that was his last year, but he looks pretty healthy for those years. That line of the Chase family all lived into their 90s. Betsy Chase told me her father lived to be 98, and he was hoping to hit 100, but didn't quite make it. This is another brother, Miller Chase, the younger brother of the Chase family. And then this is an interesting family, the Hicks family. And the Hicks family lived right here on Manitou Road. The house right at the end of Parma Center Road was the Hicks homestead. Very early settlers here in Parma and Greece. This is Norton Hicks, and he married Roby Chase. She became Roby Chase Hicks. And there's confusion in this family because she had a granddaughter named Roby Hicks, and she married a guy by the name of Chase. So this is Roby Chase Hicks, and the other one is Roby Hicks Chase. And gets everybody doing genealogy all mixed up. But they lived over on the Chase Road. There was another cousin of Isaac Chase, I think it was a nephew of Isaac Chase Sr., who was Philip Chase, and he moved over on the road that was named after them in Hamlin, called the Chase Road. Now this is the little article. Now, the church here owns this very early log book of the record of the church, which is fascinating. They had things called church court. If you were caught dancing somewhere, you would have to go to church court. And the brothers and the sisters on church court would sit there and talk about what your future might be with the church. You could be excommunicated, or you could be welcomed back in if you repented. It's very, very strict. But that's not about what is going on here. It says December 4th, this was an 1841 record. It said, we met at the schoolhouse and had a pretty good time. Nothing special with us. Brother Thomas was with us and preached on Sunday following, stayed until Tuesday, and adjusted, and I think the word there should be adjudicated, very much in settling some difficulties that had existed sometime. And Isaac Chase Jr. is the clerk. And there are numerous little interesting records going through that book, and sometime it would be interesting to do a program covering some of the interesting church court events that took place. And even Isaac Chase had to go to church court once. Is that correct, Jesse?
Yes.
Yes, I thought I read that. And I don't know what he did, but they called him out. And
Yeah, we don't either.
main burial place for North Parma, and some people from Hamlin and Greece come there. The next larger cemetery is Parma Corners, and we have 2 Revolutionary War veterans buried there. And then there's the 6 historic cemeteries. The biggest one is Husick Hill, which is in what was once called the town of West Greece. And as Mr. Sowers knows, the old congregational church that stood there right on the top of the hill, which was right on top of Manitou Road, straddled half of it was in Greece and the other half was in Parma. And so that church was a beautiful colonial style church with a tall steeple. As you would drive up Manitou Road, you would see that right in front of you, towering above on the hill. However, the congregation seemed to diminish, and some of them came down here and attended this church, and the others went to another church at Parma Corners. That church was torn down somewhere around 1910, I believe, in order to widen or to straighten Manitou, because when Manitou Road was a dirt road, you went up to the ridge and then you had to jog around the church to go behind the hill and then straight down Manitou Road. It was a sensible thing to do. People have told me that they dug a little too far west and got into the cemetery, and I don't know how true that is, but there were some upset people at the time. The next small cemetery is the castle. The Atchison is at the top. That's our earliest cemetery. The Atchison family were the first settlers here in what was called Braddock Bay Township. They came in 1796, all the way from Tolland, Connecticut. And they settled in Canandaigua, and guess what? They didn't like it over there. They didn't like the land. It was too stony. They lost 2 of their children there, and then in March, they came over here and they settled down in that gully on the hill road that goes around the creek. And their cemetery is up on that hill, and it's still there. And some of our oldest graves are in there. Silas Leonard is a Revolutionary War veteran, and Bezaleel Atchison. The Castle Cemetery is on Peck Road. We have a veteran in there. Sage Knapp, Mr. Billings is over there. The Dunbar Road is a cemetery that we spent a lot, the Historical Society spent a lot of time restoring about 15 years ago. William Henry is buried there in the Henry plot, which is surrounded by a little Victorian fence, metal fence. He lived in Hilton, which was then called Unionville, up on Henry Street. Well, Henry Street was named for him, let me put it that way. His farm was across the street next to where the Quest School is. And he first settled up on top of South Hill, about where the road goes into, I think it's Cambridge Drive. And the house was torn down about 1950. And across the street is where Jonathan Underwood, our first settler, settled. So that is kind of where things began in Hilton. And then there's the Wright Cemetery over on the Dunbar Road and the Hamlin Town Line Road. And in there is Noah Downs. And Noah Downs is Tom Berger's ancestor. And his claim to fame was he was on the Sullivan Campaign. The Sullivan Campaign was initiated by George Washington. And it's kind of a touchy subject. It's all part of the Revolutionary War lore. The Seneca Indians, who were the Native Americans in western New York, around the Finger Lakes, the Six Nations, sided with the British. And there was confusion there. And the settlers that were moving in a little too early often got tomahawked or scalped, or all kinds of bad things happened. And so George Washington asked John Sullivan, who was one of his generals, if he would come up and remove the Seneca Indians, not kill them, but move them towards Buffalo to the reservation, which he did. And in doing so, he destroyed all their farmlands. And ironically, the Jesuit priests that had come to the New World in the 1600s sailed down the St. Lawrence River, and they came to around Geneva, Canandaigua, Seneca Lake. They taught the Native Americans how to plant apple trees. And all those trees were taken down. I had a picture of one of those apple trees that survived, but didn't make it into the PowerPoint, but it's in the 2-volume set of Apples of New York, written in 1903. And it's a fascinating tree, and it tells about us that this is one of the trees planted by the natives, as the Jesuits showed them how to cultivate apples. That tree is no longer standing, but at least it's a picture of it. So, these are the veterans listed here. I won't go through them all. And then there's the map in the book that shows you how to get to each one of these cemeteries if you're interested in visiting any of these particular sites. It's really a great thing for young people to do. I know our recreation department is setting up a kind of a mystery tour where they treasure hunt, I guess you'd call it, to go visit each one of these, and then you mark off and get somebody to stamp it and win a prize. But it gets the youth. If we don't get our history to our young people, it'll be lost and forgotten. George Santayana, a Spanish philosopher, said, those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. And when I see what's going on in some places in the country, I get a little nervous about that. So in Parma, and probably all historical societies, our main objective, somehow get into the schools and make history interesting for the kids and get them out. We've got plenty of things in Parma, plenty of things in Greece that we can show these children that will connect them with their local history. And lastly is the front cover of the book. And this is the book that will be available over in the reception hall. It was put together and researched by Amanda Dudley, who's the assistant Village of Hilton historian. She's a young woman. Well, everybody who's young that's under 70 to me. She's probably 45. She's married. She's got a child. This is her son, Quentin. And she has a full-time job. And yet she takes the time to research, and she put together this book of our 16 patriots, and that is Hilton and Parma's connection to the Revolutionary War. We don't have any battlefields, no great heroics that we can tout, but we do have that. And so this year we're celebrating the patriots that are buried in Parma. And many other towns and villages are doing the same thing. That little ditty I sang to you, those guys, much like the guys that came back from Vietnam, were not celebrated after the war. They felt they were, just bypassed. And a lot of them lost limbs. It's hard to know what they experienced. A lot of veterans, a lot of them didn't live long. A few of them did. But today we're celebrating them. As we celebrate this 250. And so that ends my program, and thank you very much for attending. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Like World War I veterans didn't get celebrated either.
No. It's
They went through real bad times.
I remember there was one in Parma Center that came back. He had some kind of gas, and he couldn't talk right, and the kids used to mock him. This is like 40, 50 years ago, but I've heard those stories.
My grandfather used to have to get treated for mustard gas, shrapnel, and bean shell. And my grandmother told me that some of the shrapnel used to come out of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awful.
Are there any questions anybody has? Yes, sir.
I'd just like to make one comment. The cemetery over on Pike Road, if people do go there to visit, be extremely careful walking around in there. Because some of the graves are starting to settle.
Is what?
Some of those graves are starting to settle.
Okay. Yeah.
They're all falling all over boxes up there, so be a little careful when I walk.
Thank you for that information.
What does a Husic really mean? I know it means.
Husic, well, that's a good story. One of these little stories, and you only get these when people ask questions, so thank you. There was a doctor up there named Dr. Bradley, and his house was on the grief side. He was a grief supervisor back at one time. Dr. Bradley would pull out of his driveway with a...
Dave, get closer to the microphone.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah.
Dr. Bradley would pull out of his driveway in his carriage, and Martha Neely was a nosy neighbor that lived next door, and she would say, "Who's sick? Who's sick?" And that's one story. Then there was a story that some of the settlers came from Hoosick Falls, New York, up on the Vermont border. Bill, do you know any more on that?
No, there is, on our website under bicentennial snapshots, we did 50 videos, and one of them is on the names of Hoosick and what was the other one? Henpeck. There's another one that there's a dozen different reasons for.
Yeah. Well, I think I like the
Jack
one.
is another one. There's at least 12 different reasons why it was called that.
I'm going to stick to Martha Neely and Dr. Bradley. And then there's the perpetual one here. The children in school think the Hojack Railroad was the Hojack Railroad. But Hojack, it was the Rome, Watertown, and Ogdensburg Railroad. And not the Hojack. The story behind Hojack is two. One that as engineers would pass each other, they wave and say, "Hi, Jack." Hojack. And then another one was a farmer that his mule was chasing the train that had cut through his farm. The mule hadn't seen a train before, so he was chasing it. And the farmer said, "Whoa, Jack, whoa, Jack." So there's another story.
The railroad, we've got stories where the railroad officially said, no one that works for the railroad can call it Hojack. That was...
Yeah. Well, that's what we even named it Hojack Lane up there. And everybody that I know calls it that. Nobody, well, the Rome, Watertown, and Ogdensburg Railroad is a mouthful of words. And you could say the R, W, and O, but that's even more. So Hojack is real easy, and so Hojack it is. But we got to keep the accurate history footnoted in there. So
doesn't the plaque say Hojack up there or something?
What's that?
Isn't there a plaque up there that says the Hojack?
Oh yeah. But I don't know if any of you have driven up Hojack Lane and you see that P104 marker that's there. You know what that stands for?
It's mile marker or
It's a mile marker. It's Pulaski, 104 miles.
Oh, cool.
And every mile along the old Rome, Watertown, and Ogdensburg was one of those. Somehow that one was saved by somebody back in the day. And so that's one of our favorite landmarks to ask people, what is that? And so, any other questions?
When my son was in school, they used to do field trips going down the
Yeah.
railroad tracks, the old railroad tracks. They get little souvenirs like spikes and things like that all the time, and I have them all.
Yeah.
I have all my things.
No, those are some of the treasures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My son will bring them home from school.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, and I guess
Well, I just had something that I wanted to add, which is this church's denomination's connection to the Revolutionary War. So the United Church of Christ started in 1957, and prior to that, it was a blending of the Congregational Church and Reformed churches. So, which originated by the Pilgrims in New England. So we found this, a little history that connects us as a denomination to the Revolution. So I just want to read this. It's just a couple of paragraphs. Our name may be new, but our denomination, the United Church of Christ, has a long and rich heritage of involvement with the question of freedom in this land of freedom. In the summer of 1777, Philadelphia was threatened by approaching British forces. The Pennsylvania Assembly made plans to remove all valuable property from the city, including its bells. The State House bell, which became known as the Liberty Bell, was among the valuables to be removed to the country north of the city. The 2,080-pound bell was placed on a wagon and carried 75 miles to Allentown, a small community of about 50 homes. There, under cover of night, the bell was hidden under the floor of the Zion Reformed Church, which is part of our heritage. While General Washington spent the winter at Valley Forge, the Liberty Bell was safe in Zion Church. In June of '78, the Liberty Bell was returned to the State House in Philadelphia. The Reformed churches, which sprang up during colonial times, were part of the many forebears of our modern-day United Church of Christ. Coming together with respect for each other's traditions, but devotion to one God, the United Church of Christ family includes church bodies from German Reformed, Congregational, Evangelical, and Christian church roots. So I just wanted to share that with you, that we rescued the Liberty Bell. It was probably breaking the law, but oh well.
How did it get cracked?
Huh?
How did the Liberty Bell get cracked?
Oh, it was rung so hard and so long during the country's 100th birthday that's when I believe it cracked, and that's when they had to replace it with something else and very carefully put it away. Yeah, that's a story I heard. I'm sticking to it.
There's another bell story if you've got time for one more.
One more, and then I invite everybody to come
It's
down.
getting warm. I'll make this quick. There was one of our first Baptist church used to stand on South Hill, up on the top of South Hill. They thought the village of Hilton was going to develop up on top of South Hill. It turned out by 1850 it was developing along Main Street, West Avenue, East Avenue, and so forth. So the church board decided that they better move the church down to where everybody was. And so they did. How they did this in the wintertime is beyond my comprehension, but you have I think it was 60 by 40. It was a big timbered oak church, beams. They jacked it up, and South Hill, it's a steep hill. And of course, there were no houses over there. They went out through the back. And then, of course, they had to get it across Salmon Creek, and that drops down. So they were building things to run it across. Anyway, to make a long story short, they got it up on Main Street, and they put it right about where the old post office used to be, right in the center of Main Street. So you had a nice colonial church in a small town. Village Square was to the east of it. In 1877, a wagon shop next to the church caught fire, and it jumped over to the church and caught the church on fire. And the bell came crashing down onto Main Street and broke into many pieces. And so what to do, it cooled off, and everybody was upset about it, but somehow somebody made arrangements to get it back to Troy, New York, where it was originally cast, and they recast the bell from the pieces and sent it back and put it in the new First Baptist Church, which stood on West Avenue, which is now an apartment building. And I'm not sure where the bell went after that. Well, do you have any idea?
No, there was a bell in the newer church, and that was removed, and it's actually sits out front on the front lawn.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's the same bell.
Well, I've heard that it was given to the Methodists at one time, but then that church too got a fire. I somehow think that bell is still around town.
Yeah,
And there is an
If
inscription.
it was, it could be that one that's out front of the church.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. But anyway, that's a bell story, so that'll be it for tonight.
Well, please come down for refreshments. Follow your nose to the end of the hall.
Right on Lake